Hello, my name is Lauren McCaulyey, and I am here today to talk to you about branding concepts and the difference between functional and psychic messaging. During this presentation, I will first give a background of functional and psychic messaging. I will then go into the different branding concepts that will need to be understood in order to make a rational decision. I will then list the statement of options. I will then go into the meaning of functional branding messages. I will list the advantages and disadvantages of using functional branding messages as well as examples for each. I will then talk about psychic branding messages, and I will too give advantages and disadvantages for using psychic branding messages and then examples for both of those as well. And then I will end with my decision on whether to use functional or psychic branding messages and the conclusion. Now, before I move forward, I first want to give a background. Branding can be extremely strong for organizations and companies. It can really excel an organization to the forefront of their specific industry. And there's two different concepts that can be used to develop a brand strategy when it comes to messaging, and that's either functional or emotional. So to go over some of the branding concepts that need to be known in order to make a rational decision on whether to use functional or whether to use emotional is the root of branding. And the root of branding is really to create a personal and a social identity for that organization. It's also to be like others, but also to be unlike others as well. It needs to have some differentiation. And then also lastly, it's to have a good reputation. The organization needs a good reputation. The brand needs a good reputation in order to succeed. Now, emotional and psychic branding, it really identifies with the consumer's image by relating to their societal emotions or their self-image. It really Psychic branding really engages a consumer's emotions, and that's how companies can effectively make their advertising messages. And then functional branding relates to customers' rational decision making. Branding strategy is used by companies to create a competitive advantage, and brand identity are the components of the brand actually created by the organization or the company. And it's really how the company wants to be identified, whereas the brand reputation is how the brand is perceived by the customers. Now, to list my statement of options, a company can either decide whether to use a psychic or an emotional messaging when developing their brand strategy. And I have a graph here that shows, there's the product features, what are the functional benefits, what are the emotional benefits, and really a company needs to stress either one of those when it comes to their brand messaging. Now, functional branding messages. What is functional branding? Functional branding either solves a problem or fulfills a consumer's needs. Functional messaging will utilize infomercials, money-back guarantees, and testimonials to market their products. And essentially the advantages of functional branding is it really fulfills the needs. Any utilitarian type need. It also solves a problem or reduces frustration. And it's also recession driven. Especially nowadays, people are looking for low cost discounted items. Actually in Actually, in 2010, 62% of companies were focusing more on advertising their functional benefits of their products. They really wanted to fulfill a need for their consumers. And some examples of successful functional branding campaigns are the Domino's Pizza "Oh Yes We Did" campaign that they did in 2010. Actually, their same-store sales rose by 10%, and they also, over the 3 years, saw a larger market growth as well. And then Swiffer has also been doing a campaign where one of their TV commercials features a family, and the father, unfortunately, does not have his arm, and it shows how the Swiffer can be functional to that family and be beneficial to that family. Now, some disadvantages of functional branding messages is that it can be conflicted by competitor messaging, so the consumer can get confused. Also, functional branding messages can be easily replicated. And since there's no emotional attachment with functional branding messages, there's no brand loyalty that's developed. And then also it really confines the brand when the market changes or if a company is looking into brand extensions. And some examples of unsuccessful functional branding campaigns was a Nike commercial that featured a very popular running athlete, and she was actually being chased by a chainsaw maniac. And the maniac got winded and was not able to keep up with her. And their slogan was, "Why sport? You'll live longer." And Nike's goal was to fulfill a need, to fulfill the need that people need to maintain good health. But unfortunately, it wasn't taken that way and was not successful and was taken off the air. And then the other one was Laker Airways. Laker Airways actually started over in Europe by offering no-frills, low-cost flights over the pond. And the owner wanted to bring that over to America with the same kind of concept, the low-cost tickets, but unfortunately, American competitors just easily matched those same fares, so they were not successful over in America. Now, psychic branding messages. What are psychic branding messages? They really relate to one's self-image. They really connect with a consumer's emotions to create a desire for a certain product. And the advantages of psychic branding messages is it really adds depth to the brand, and it also makes the consumer feel ownership of that product. And there's also a connection between the brand and the consumer, and that connection is actually heightened as well. And additionally, it's human nature to be accepted by others. And what that means is when a product can determine social status, people really want to feel accepted by others. And some examples of a successful psychic branding campaign is actually Rolex. Rolex has been able to brand themselves as a brand that is intelligent, that signifies intelligence, talent, and financial security. And their slogan is Rolex, a crown for every achievement. And I think that really relates to what their brand signifies. Some disadvantages are that there's been a lack of scientific research to show that psychic branding actually works. And it can also limit brand concept because you really need to hone in on what you're trying to convey to the consumers, how you want the self-image to be, what kind of message you're conveying, and it's not going to be liked by all as well. And an example of unsuccessful psychic branding campaign is actually Diet Pepsi, where they introduced their skinny can during the New York Fashion Show. And they pronounced it to be in celebration of beautiful, confident women, and critics were not happy with it, especially during a time where obesity and eating disorders are so prevalent. So for my decision, I think using a functional branding strategy, because it relates to a person's rational decision making, and no one's going to make a purchase where they don't think it's rational. It fulfills the needs, and needs are always going to have to be met. So that is why I decided that functional branding messages is the best route when developing a branding strategy. Thank you so much, and have a good night.